essential thing. But we all challenge that notion. The co-hosts of this forum are focused on the quality of life concerns that are critical for Houston's economic future. This is green in Houston is about economic health, and we all agree on that. It's a nice to have, but it's also a must have. There's a growing national consensus that parks, green space, healthy waterways, streetscapes, multimodality are important to the environment and essential ingredients for 21st century cities. We believe that creating a connected system of parks and waterways accessible to all Houstonians, pedestrians, bicycles, all transportation modes, is essential for our economy. Houston has been described as ugly, disheveled, chaotic, hot by such widely read publications as The Economist, The New York Times, and the Smithsonian. We've all heard that, and we can not care what outsiders say, but it actually does matter. It's a recruiting issue for us, and we want to change that reputation. Tonight's sponsors share a common consensus that quality of life, including parks and recreation, well-designed streets and public spaces, walkability are must-have for any city competing globally to attract and retain top talent. In fact, we generally agree that we're in an urgent race with competing cities to get this infrastructure in place. Parks are underfunded. In Houston, we have wonderful parks like Memorial Park, Buffalo Bayou Park, this amazing park we're in, Herman Park, and all its improvements. We've got this amazing thing going on, this bio-greenways that's connecting them all together. But for many Houstonians, there are no parks within walking distance. Trust for Public Land has a new metric that they're measuring cities by, and they say you need to have a park within a 10-minute walk. That's a pretty aggressive standard to put into a city that is as large as ours. You know, about 5 of our big competing cities fit within Beltway 8. It's a lot easier for those groups. It may be the right metric, it may not, but it's become widely recognized and quantified that the investment in parks pays back in quality of life, pays it back in tax revenues, and our Parks Department is always underfunded, and it's always getting by on a very thin dime of operating. It needs capital to catch up. Tonight's hosts believe effective, well-designed, attractive streets support continued growth and economic vitality. The health and well-being of residents and vibrant neighborhoods, and successful streets that connect people with major destinations, parks among them, they don't just happen. They come about because individuals and agencies within the public and private sectors make decisions and take appropriate action. Mayor Parker signed a Complete Streets executive order which requires that new and rebuilt streets in Houston are designed for users of all ages and work for people in cars, on bicycles, mass transit, or on foot. These streets make efficient use of resources and often include plantings to address water quality concerns, flood control, appropriate location of utility infrastructure, and making a street more pleasant. Parks and trails are a good thing, and we know that a city should be more attractive rather than not. Everyone is aware of the great progress Houston has made in the last 15 years toward becoming a more beautiful city. Tonight, we would like to hear what each of you have to say about how you will guide and enhance Houston's quality of life and continue its current positive trajectory. And with that, I get to turn this over to news reporter Doug Miller, who has covered everything from the cop shop to Capitol Hill during more than 30 years in the news business. He's worked as a police reporter, a NASA correspondent, a newspaper editor, and a Washington bureau chief. And now he's a senior reporter with KHOU 11. Would you please welcome Doug Miller?
Ma'am?
Before Mr.
Candidate Party. This is a mayoral forum.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
I
We'd
am
appreciate
a
if you would take
mayoral
your seat.
candidate.
You were not invited to appear here.
And I
If
was
you
not
take your
invited
seat.
because
Yeah, okay.
my democracy was so
Ma'am, we would
full of
appreciate
life.
it if you would take your seat.
They have a
And if you
contractual
don't, we're going to have to
agreement
call in security.
circulating around
Okay.
to keep my voice from not being heard.
Okay, ma'am, we've heard your voice, and
This
if you would
is
sit
not
down,
democracy.
we would appreciate
This
it.
is not freedom. This is not equality.
All right, ma'am, thank you very much. Please take your seat.
No.
All right.
We will be leaving.
Okay, that'd be a good thing.
However,
Okay.
you need to understand.
Ma'am, appreciate it if you leave now.
You need to
Okay.
understand. You got this. Get close. You need to understand. Get along. You need to understand as voters.
Thanks very much,
You
ma'am.
have a right. You have a right to hear all candidates.
That's right. Everybody has rights
When
to
God
run.
reigns on the just, He reigns on the unjust. That is fair. So you need to vote for, don't put your hands on me,
Ma'am.
a fair democracy. I am Demetria Smith for Houston Mayor. Have a good day.
All right, that was entertaining.
Very much.
All right.
And I will be on there.
All right. Well, this forum, the structure of the forum is interesting. We are going to hear from all of the candidates on the issues that were discussed a bit earlier. But to begin with, we'd like to hear each of the candidates talk about what their top priorities are for about 90 seconds. Tell us who they are and give us their top priorities, and perhaps address some of the subject we heard about just a moment ago. We'll start with Adrian Garcia. Is Mr. Garcia?
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you all for being here. Obviously, by the attendance of tonight's event, you understand as well as I do that parks are an incredible jewel that we must protect, we must support, we must nurture, and we must invest into. I'm Adrian Garcia, and I want to be your mayor. But I had the honor of being born and raised in this great town. I did grow up on a tough side of Houston where tough things happen, but Houston still gave me the opportunity to work for you rather for the last 35 years. As a Houston police officer, as a member of council, and as your sheriff. I'm on council leading on many green space initiatives, supporting many incredible projects like the public-private partnership that created Discovery Green. Then working with an incredible public servant like Joe Turner to make sure that we were providing the resources and maintenance for parks that is so critically needed so that young people in our community can enjoy them. I'm Adrian Garcia, and I want to be your parks mayor. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Garcia. Now on to Ben Hall, by the way, couldn't attend. I understand there was some sort of dental emergency that I've heard. So anyway, he unfortunately couldn't attend this evening, but Bill King is with us. Mr. King.
I'm sorry, what's the timing here? Your green is what?
Green is go.
Got it. 90 seconds and red is shut up. You got 90 seconds, right?
And is it 1 minute? Beg your pardon, is it 90 seconds? Is that what our timing is here? We're doing 90 seconds?
Why?
It's 60, I beg your
I
pardon.
thought maybe I wasn't paying attention. Everybody else
This is bad when a television reporter doesn't know the difference between 60 and 90 seconds. Mr. King, you have 60 seconds.
60 seconds or 90 seconds?
We're going 60.
I think Adrian got more than 60 seconds.
Well, do we?
Okay, so I'm Bill King. I'm running for mayor because I think that we have a city government that's not living up to the greatness of our city today. There's three things in particular I'm concerned about: the infrastructure, its embarrassment, public safety. We have a spike in crime. We're not doing a very good job enforcing our basic criminal laws. But fundamentally, at the heart of all the problems are finances. And you know, I run into a lot of folks that don't want to think about finances. It's boring. It is absolutely driving everything else in this city. And all these issues that Tom's talking about, not having funding, it's because our financial model is not working in the city of Houston. In the last 6 years, the city has an additional $1 billion in revenue. 1 billion with a B, and yet we haven't balanced the budget in about 10 years. We've got deficits as far as the eye can see, and we've got $20 billion in debt. If you want to find funding for parks and those kinds of green space projects, we've got to fix these finances.
Thank you, Mr. King. Marty McVeigh, 60 seconds.
Thank you. I'll just stand up so you can see me. My name is Marty McVeigh, and I grew up in a small town in western North Carolina. My dad was a former police officer who later became a judge, and my mom was an entrepreneur. And they instilled in me a sense that I must give back to the community in which I took. And Houston gave me a lot of opportunities that I came here and I received. I worked hard and I got those opportunities. And I want to make sure that the next generation has the same opportunities that I had when I came to Houston. And to do that, we must have good fiscal responsibility. We must have good management practices. We must look for opportunities to bring in more revenue into the city. The reality is that this city is growing by hundreds of people per day. We're not being able to keep up with that growth in a smart way. So we need a real plan for the city of Houston that includes good parks, economic development, good urban planning, good police, expanding our police department and fire department. So if we want the best Houston to be the best city in America, we need the best fire department, the best police department, and the best city services. That's why I'm running for mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McVeigh. Sylvester Turner.
Thank you. When you look at the issues that are facing the city, financial management, infrastructure, public safety, economic inequality, education, those are the issues that are facing the city. But tonight I really want to focus on parks and green space and waterways, because I grew up in this city years ago. When you talked about green space and parks, those were feel-good things, quality of life things, tree huggers. But now we've discovered that green equals money. And it does add to the quality of life. And it is what attracts people to this city. And people are looking for that. And we have to build a city for the future, not a city for the past. And there are many people in this area who are looking for it. There are some where parks are relatively close to them. And then there are many areas where parks are not close. And then if they have parks, they don't have the equipment and the things that they need for them to fully access them. If we can build the major stadiums downtown and places for the football teams, certainly we can build parks and green space for people who need them each and every day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turner.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all the organizations for coming together to put on this very important discussion about green space and the overall quality of life, and it's so appropriate that we gather at this incredible new green space here in Houston. It's obviously a very exciting time this week here in Houston, with all eyes focused on Buffalo Bayou. And when I think about where Buffalo Bayou was when I was serving on council back in the 90s and where it is today, and that it's already become such an iconic place where so many Houstonians want to be, it's really extraordinary, the progress that we're making here in the city of Houston. Hopefully later on in this program, I'll have an opportunity to discuss a program where we can turn our young people into bayou keepers and give them an educational experience in the process. I got a little too close to the bayou on Memorial Day and watched 3 feet of water come into my home, but that makes me more appreciative of organizations like the Katy Prairie Conservancy and the work you all are doing. So I think it's going to be a great discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris Bell. Steve Costello.
Thank you. I'm one of your at-large council members. I'm Steve Costello. I'm an engineer. I'm a successful business owner, a job creator, and I'm your at-large council member. And I'm also a member of the Memorial Park Conservancy Board. I've been on and off that board since 1996 and past chairman. Ask yourself, who better to focus on green space than someone who constantly is doing that. I'm a long-time runner and a triathlete. And to be honest with you, I don't cycle in the city of Houston very often because I'm one of those level 4s based on the bike lane. We need to change that. We have many challenges facing the city of Houston. And as a budget chair, I understand those challenges. And as an infrastructure person and engineer, I understand those challenges as well. So I look forward to having a discussion about the challenges that are facing the city and how we can improve on our park space and green space tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Costello. And now we move on to questions from the various groups, these submitted by the various groups and prepared by the various groups that are putting on this forum tonight. The first question we'll address first to Chris Bell. Understanding that first impressions of Houston are formed along its streets and freeways, will you support the city's 35-year-old ban on new billboards, including the ban on swapping existing billboards for ever-changing digital billboards? You have 30 seconds to answer that question, Mr. Bell.
Oh, I wonder if Scenic Houston submitted that question.
I was thinking the same thing.
And having been the city's representative at the Scenic America convention back when I was serving on council and learning a great deal and a lot of great new ideas of what other cities were doing, of course, I will continue to support their efforts regarding billboards.
Very good. Mr. Costello.
Well, everyone says that the city of Houston's beauty is at street level. And it's not just billboards, but it's also litter on the stick, as Councilmember Frida Brown said. We need to do a better job of figuring out a way how we bury our utilities so that we have a beauty at street level, because we do not have mountains in the background or an ocean. And that's what I hope to accomplish moving forward.
Mr. Garcia.
Well, let me use 29 seconds to think about this question. No, look, obviously we have made incredible progress to demonstrate that Houston's a cosmopolitan city by making our city much more attractive and much more inviting and pleasing to the eye for people who are visiting the community. Without a doubt, I'll continue to support the ban and then work with you to see what more progress we can accomplish. I mean, at the end of the day, if the Woodlands, Sugarland, surrounding communities have been able to figure this out, so can Houston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcia. Bill King, 30 seconds.
Well, look, I think all of us would like to see less billboards, there's no question about that. When I was the mayor of Kima, I actually adopted the first comprehensive sign ordinance in that city, and we did a number of deals where we traded out signs to get fewer signs. There's actually fewer signs in Kima today than there were when I became mayor there, so sure, I support it.
Mr. McVeigh?
Yes, of course I support it, and I think that we need to look at what other cities have done around the country to trade out digital boards for the existing boards, and there's, I think it was Minneapolis that's traded 10-1. So we need to have a resource like that we can use. The billboards, especially digital, are also part of our evacuation plan for the city of Houston that can be utilized to evacuate people safely and quickly out of the city, so I would certainly support swapping those out.
Mr. Turner.
And the answer is yes. I can remember years ago when you were coming from Intercontinental Airport, especially coming down I-45, and it was just ugly. To put it frankly, we have air pollution, we have water pollution, we also have sight pollution. And this is a beautiful city. We need to keep it a beautiful city, and I don't think we need to clog it up on I-45 or I-59 coming from the airport with signs.
Very good, Mr. Turner. And this question, Mr. Turner, will be addressed first to you. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer this question. Why is walkable park access, park quality and quantity, and quality of neighborhood parks important? Do you see this as needing an immediate proactive campaign, or do you expect to continue with the current plan and budget? Again, 60 seconds to you, Mr. Turner.
It is important, and let me just speak from a specific point of view. There are many families in my legislative district, for example, the district some of are situated, that cannot afford to go to Minute Maid or some of the sports arenas. And even if I gave them the tickets, they can't afford the hot dogs and the fries to go along with it. They need neighborhood parks. They need good quality neighborhood parks. That's why several years ago when I went to the mayor at the time and asked them to redo the West Little York Park, 29 acres of nothing, weeds and trees, and they said, you know, we don't have the money. I said, that's not an answer. So if I raised the money and if I built this park out, will the city at least agree to maintain it? They said yes. Well, I raised that money, $2.6 million. The West Little York Park, now we got baseball fields, jogging trails, night lighting, irrigation on every site. It is now the second urban youth baseball academy, not in the state, but in the country. And 2,400 kids grow through that park every single year in Acres Home. And you ought to go out there now and see the people that are walking and jogging. It makes a tremendous difference. And now Lone Star Community College built their college right down the
Thank you,
street.
Mr. Turner. Mr. Bell, 60 seconds to answer that question.
Well, it's incredibly important, and accessibility to the parks is incredibly important, and that's why in my announcement I said that in my first term we would build or repair 200 miles of sidewalk, and a lot of that needs to be around park space so that people can get to them and get to them safely, and that's about a 25 mile per year increase over what we're currently doing. I also think there's a lot of vacant land here in the city of Houston where we could look at pocket parks. Obviously, I feel very strongly about this. One of my proudest accomplishments when I was serving on council was the renovation of Baldwin Park. It was sitting there. It basically had just become a gathering ground for the homeless and was not serving anyone really in the community. Working with the city, we were able, in Leadership Houston, we were able to go in, clean up the park, get new park equipment, a new walking trail, And then to be able to drive by there and see families taking full advantage of it and kids playing on the playground equipment and it no longer just being a gathering ground for the homeless was an incredible success.
Thank you, Mr.
More of
Bell.
those stories here.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Costello, 60 seconds.
So when I'm with my wife, when we're at the shopping mall, I can't walk for 20 minutes. But I'm a marathoner and I can run for 4 hours. But it's a scientific fact that walking is beneficial to public health. And not everyone has a bike. So we're calling them bike trails, they're really walking trails. And what we need to do, if you think about it, years ago, the Bayou City was a connotation that we flooded. Now we're taking what we thought was not an asset and making it into an asset. But it's going east to west. What the city needs to do, we need to make a grid going north-south. And that's why when Representative Murphy carried that bill on behalf of the city to allow us to build trails along corridors, in particular utility corridors, we'll make that connection. And that's what the ultimate goal of this plan is the dovetailing with the Bayou 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. Mr. Garcia.
Without a doubt, I mean, we must resolve this issue of park equity. We have, the theme of my campaign is all in Houston. It means a lot of things in a lot of regards. But where it means a great deal is that every side of town ought to have immediate access to a well-maintained park that provides healthy opportunities for all communities. We know that parks provide the opportunity for young people to get active and not just sit on their sofas and do the Nintendo thing. But we need to make sure that there's a dedication to that. We must grow. Half the city doesn't have access to a park. We got to resolve that. That can't be Houston. So we have to provide strategic private-public partnerships so that we can create things like we did with Discovery Green. But at the end of the day, my focus on parks is about the economy of Houston. You build a park, Houston's economy gets stronger. And so that's where I'm going to approach this angle for encouraging more parks in our city.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. King.
So I think the Linear Parks project has to be the backbone of any park system in Houston. It's the only really interesting or unique topographical feature that we have in the city. And it's a spider web that covers the entire city. And wouldn't it be great if this was the generation that actually finished that project and it was conceived 100 years ago, and you think about all the great legacy projects we received, like the port and the medical center and all these things. What's our legacy? Shouldn't that be our legacy? But in addition to that, we need a lot of neighborhood parks to fill those in. The city owns about 2,000 lots all around the city right now, and there's probably 5 times that many that have delinquent taxes that we could go foreclose on. Why not try to assemble those up into some neighborhood parks? Wouldn't cost us anything to buy that land. And I know that you're over there worried about maintaining neighborhood parks, Joe, because you told me that before. But I still think it's important that we have that.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. McVeigh.
Well, as a businessman, I know that our parks are an asset, and it is an economic priority in the next administration that we must take our parks and utilize them in order to bring new businesses and people into the city. We have the opportunity to recruit manufacturing and technology businesses right into the city of Houston. Those businesses will create new rooftops. Rooftops pay into revenue into the system. So if we're going to use a selling tool for the city of Houston, it has to be our parks. It has to be good streets. It has to be great law enforcement and other things that the city has. But we can no longer continue to operate in silos where we are only doing one thing at a time. We must have a general plan for the city of Houston, one that encompasses everything that we want. So that way the future administrations can't undo things that we want, like good parks, like hike and bike trails, like other things that bring new development, new people into this city.
Thank you very much, Mr. McVeigh. And Mr. McVeigh, this question will go first to you too, and it's a reference back to the last question. If you believe that an immediate proactive campaign on this issue is necessary, how do you plan to address it, and how do you plan to pay for your priorities? 60 seconds on that question.
It is part of our economy, and we've got to really focus on our Houston economy. I mean, it was just talked about just a few minutes ago before we started. This is part of our regional economy, and we've got to focus on our Houston efforts here. So, how you pay for that, it's you bringing in more people, rooftops into the city. I am not an advocate for raising property taxes, so how do we get more revenue into the system? more rooftops, more payers, more businesses that will pay for these things. So we also need to look for federal grants that are available to us from the federal government, from the state government. We need to have the mayor be a chief advocate for getting our taxpayer dollars back into the city to help us pay for these types of things. There are a lot of stones that have been unturned in the city of Houston, and I intend to look at that, reshape Houston government, how it works, how it's inefficient, and look for ways to expand our opportunities in this area in particular.
Thank you, Mr. McVeigh. Mr. Turner, 60 seconds on that subject.
I think partnerships are critically important. The way we were able to fund the program out there on the north side is that I partnered with the Astros and Major League in order to make that happen along with the state. And I think we do have to look at, for example, in many of our sports teams, to ask them to join in. Super Bowl is coming in 2017. What would be a more wonderful investment than to invest in our parks for kids in that area? Secondly, in the legislature, we provide state park funding, but there's also a specific line items for local parks. The $1.5 million that I was able to get to Emancipation Park comes specifically out of that local parks funding element. We really need to lobby much stronger to increase that line item, which will benefit all local parks and not just Stakes Park. It's already there. We need to push for more. And then in Seattle, for example, I think they've started like a local parks district. I think we need to look at some creative ways of addressing this issue. I think people are very supportive of neighborhood parks, and I think people would be inclined to do that. And then lastly, we need to modify the revenue cap.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Turner. Mr. Bell, 60 seconds on that subject.
Well, he finally mentioned it, and we've sort of been ignoring the elephant in the room, and that's the revenue cap. And I'm the only one up here who said, let's repeal it. It's terrible public policy. It's strangling the city. And obviously, when the city faces financial problems like we do now, one of the things everybody worries about getting cut are parks. And so that's just another reason among many that we need to do away with the revenue cap, and I'd be willing to put political capital behind that effort to do away with it. We need that revenue. People want on-time garbage collection without paying a fee for it. They want smoother streets. They want more green space. All those things cost money. So the realistic and responsible position is to repeal the revenue cap. So that's one way of paying for it. Also, I think we need to look at public-private partnerships. When we're trying to develop these pocket parks, when we're trying to improve areas of existing parks, obviously there are a lot of folks in the private sector that are willing to partner with the city of Houston, and we need to be taking advantage of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bell. Mr. Costello.
I'm the current chair of the Transportation Policy Council for the Houston-Gallatin Area Council. We distribute all federal and state dollars across the region. A portion of that money is congestion mitigation and air quality, which can be used for park investments. That's what we should be asking for. Also, if you think about Rebuild Houston, I met with the Parks Board when I first advocated for this program in 2010. Half of the cost of Bayou 2020 is land acquisition. Rebuild Houston has to buy detention facilities to mitigate for the projects that are going on. Why aren't we doing them at the Bayou edge? So that the city buys the land, we dig the hole for the detention, and then the park improvements are allocated into the system. You can be creative that way. The other ways is also you can set up a overlapping taxing entity to take advantage of the ad valorem increase related to that and allocate it towards the future maintenance of the projects. There are creative ways to bridge this gap. We just need to sit back and look at them and take advantage of them.
Mr. Garcia?
Well, first of all, we know that adding more parks is important to Houston's sustainability. If we add more green space, we will attract more businesses, we will strengthen our economy, but we have to make sure that we finance or reform our finances, including pensions, so that we can provide for that. It's unfair that, the park space that we have now, poor Joe has like about 4,000 complaints, I think, that he has to contend with. He has 150 less personnel to service the parks, and yet we have about a 350 park system. And we can't grow it on the current budget. And so my commitment to you as your mayor is to put real money behind this. We have to make sure to continue to invest. And first of all, let me just say to everybody in the room, you've helped Houston make incredible progress to this commitment towards our green space. Look at what we've done in Herman Park. We need to look at those strategic models that provide for public-private partnership to provide the resources to create those park spaces.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. King.
So this goes to the very heart of what I was talking about in my opening statement, which is getting control of the finances. Revenues are up $1 billion. We don't need to get rid of the property tax cap. And by the way, you will not get rid of it because it is wildly unpopular for the average voter out there. It's not going to happen. But I'll tell you something else that you probably haven't heard is that our sales tax declined 3 or 4 last months. First time that's happened in 6 years. And with Goldman Sachs talking about oil going down into the 20s and staying there for a decade, we may be looking at a very different financial dynamic going forward in the future. We've got to get control of the expenses, and I'll give you 2 examples. We spend $75 million a year on overtime year after year after year and don't do anything about trying to right-size the workforce, get control of that. No business would ever do that. That is almost as much money as we give Joe to run the Parks Department every year. In 2009, the combined administrative budgets of the mayor's office and the city council offices was $8 million. Today it's $16 million. Joe, what could you do with another $8 million a year?
Thank you, Mr. King. You're not in the debate show, okay? But I think that Joe may have slipped a question into the hopper here. This one's going to Mr. King for 60 seconds to respond to every candidate. Do you have a plan to fund the Houston Parks and Recreation Department's operations and maintenance budget to avoid deferred and poor park maintenance? Maintenance budget, this question goes, is defined as ample funding to cut grass, pick up grass, do normal facility repairs. Anything beyond that would be bond-funded projects. That goes to you, Mr. King. Make Joe happy.
Yes, this is a great continuation. I get another 60 seconds to talk about this. There are a lot of things in our financial model that aren't working, but let me tell you what, the biggest one is the pensions. Because last year, we should have contributed $400 million to the pensions. That would have been 42% of all the property taxes you paid in the city of Houston last year. By the way, we didn't contribute that much. We didn't have the money, so we went deeper in debt to the pensions last year. By 2020, it will take over $525 million to fund the pensions, which will be more than 50% of the property taxes that you'll pay in 2020. There is no pathway to financial stability for the city of Houston that doesn't impact all services, including green space, if we don't get on top of this pension problem. I've been writing about this in my column for the last 6 or 8 years. I'm glad that everybody else on the stage has finally admitted that this is the problem. If we do not deal with this, it will absolutely undermine the financial integrity of the city of Houston.
Mr. McVeigh, 60 seconds.
Yes, of course, and I think that, if you look at my career, go to my website, martymcveigh.com, you'll see I've done this for a living, and I've turned around over 60 companies across the world, and the city of Houston is no different from this. We have structurally a management deficient city. We have to rebuild our city, tear down all the silos. Every department is working in silos. They're not working in together with each other, sharing information, sharing resources. We are wasting money. So to fund our parks, we need to be efficient with our resources. We need to look for new ways to get revenue into the system, which is through economic development. But we can do so much with just being efficient with what we already have. Every city department needs to be torn down and rebuilt based on 2015 standards in a modern city that is 4th largest city in the United States. We need to be competitive with globally across in every area, and we've got to do that by tearing down city government and rebuilding it based on our standards.
Thank you, Mr. 2015. The questions on the Parks and Recreation Department operation and maintenance budget. Mr. Turner, 60 seconds.
And Discovery Green and Buffalo Bayou Parks, the investments that were made would not have been made, but they're not a corresponding commitment for maintenance, because that's critically important. You can build the parks, but it's the maintenance that's the critical piece. And I will tell you, that was done by a committee from the turrets in the management districts. And so we're going to have to, as long as they exist, we're going to have to look to them in some parts to do even more. But to say that you're not going to revise the revenue cap and to do all of these other things is totally unrealistic. The budget agency dinged us on 3 things: the unfunded obligations, they dinged us on the debt service, and the revenue cap. This is a growing, dynamic, and vibrant city. The city of Houston is the only one that's subject to a revenue cap that is this stringent. Even the state is not subject to it, and I sit on the legislative budget board and set the spending limits. The county said, do not impose that on us. We are things you're going to have to pay for the maintenance, and so it needs to be modified. With respect to,
thank you, Mr. Turner.
I'll pick it up on the second half.
Mr. Bell, 60 seconds.
Well, I'm sort of amused by Bill King saying that the revenue cap is wildly popular. Most people hardly even know what it is. He must be a pretty strange crowd. But anyway, And the average homeowner receives next to hardly any benefit from the revenue cap, and renters receive no benefit whatsoever.